Hi, so it's very often suggested to us that antinatalism is a cowardly doctrine. This word seems to come up an awful lot, in fact, in discussions about not reproducing. But if one looks honestly at the sum total misery and horror in this world, and considers too that no one is ever harmed in the slightest by not coming into existence, because there's no one to be harmed before birth, it's very difficult, I think, to defend this characterization. Well, optimists essentially tell us that we should not give up on creating good lives, even though the cost of continuing will be thousands falling victim to agony and torture. And I think people would appreciate this fact a little more if they simply imagined their loved ones being harmed in this way. I mean, if I were to say to such a person that it absolutely is more important to prevent your loved one from being tortured in this way than creating any amount of supposedly happy people, I'm fairly certain we would not be accused of cowardice. In fact, it will be immediately apparent how outrageous it actually is to even suggest this. Now, obviously, there's no morally significant difference between those with whom we happen to have this personal relationship and those with whom we do not. That is, there's no difference in their intrinsic moral worth or considerability. And so if we agree that no amount of pleasure or good is worth the horrific, unimaginable pain of one of our loved ones, it follows, or should follow if we're being impartial, that the horrific pain of others with whom we do not have this relationship is equally objectionable. And therefore continued reproduction, which more or less guarantees this harm on some significant number of beings, is deeply problematic. Well, the larger point here is that sometimes quitting is entirely justified. It depends on what it is we're quitting, right? That is, sometimes the cost for a thing is too great and the benefits we gain from it too small. And at first glance, the maxim, don't ever give up, or keep trying till you succeed, these sound very pleasant and uplifting, right? But they're plainly bad advice if taken in too wide a sense. So imagine someone who manages to remove themselves from an abusive relationship of some kind. Now, if persistence were an absolute good, this seems to imply that this person should not have broken ties with, or indeed not even attempted to break ties with their abuser, and perhaps even that doing so was an act of cowardice. They should have found a way to make the relationship work. Or if someone suffering from interminable and incurable pain and agony chooses to terminate their own life, we should say of this person that they acted in a manner that is cowardly. They should have dealt with the pain. The absurdity of this doctrine is glaring. Moreover, we terminate our plans all the time in life to pursue other things. Indeed, part of living prudently means being able to rationally weigh costs against benefits, and deciding on the basis of this when to begin or quit some activity or course of action. And so the charge that antinatalism is weak or cowardly because it proposes quitting in some sense seems just completely empty and question-begging. It assumes that life is not worth quitting, that it's worth continuing. Yet this is the very point being examined, right? And by continuing, I mean continuing to bring new beings into existence, not continuing a life already in existence. Antinatalists are simply claiming that there are good reasons to quit or stop reproducing. And in calling this claim cowardly does not explain, much less refute, anything. If one wants to refute antinatalism, they'll need to attempt to demonstrate in some way that life is worth perpetuating. One final word on optimism. It seems to me that many people today regard being optimistic as an automatic virtue. Hence, you often hear people say things like, I'm an unconditional optimist, or I'm an optimist no matter what happens. But it's important to recognize that optimism should not be held before we examine the facts about which we are optimistic. Or in other words, prior to experience of the thing in question. So, suppose you're in a game show, and the task you're given is to leap across a randomly assigned distance. Now, you've succeeded in making it across the last 9 distances, and can either go home with the prize money you've accumulated, or you can try to make the last leap and, let's say, double your gains. Now, if you fail to get across, you of course lose all the money you've made up to this point. And you think to yourself, I'm very optimistic about this. After all, I've been successful up to now. Right? It's then revealed to you that the final distance, chosen at random, is a 40-foot gap. This is significantly longer than what the world's best athletes can jump. Now, it's perfectly clear in this case that your optimism about this jump should be revised. And you should probably quit at this point, right? In fact, you would be foolish to try, assuming that what you're after is the greatest monetary gain. The point is, our feelings towards something should bear some relation to the situation. Optimism is not correct in spite of the facts, but should always be informed and supported by the facts, and if necessary, of course, done away with. So that is all for now, and thanks again for listening.